Some theories get laughed at. Some theories get you called paranoid. And then there are theories that one day get confirmed by declassified documents, and it turns out the so-called lunatics were right about everything. Today, 9 military conspiracy theories that turned out to be completely true. And the further we go, the harder it becomes to decide what is more disturbing, the secrets themselves, or the fact that they stayed hidden for so long. Every single one of these stories begins the same way. Someone told the truth, and no one wanted to hear it. On the 2nd of August, 1964, the American destroyer Maddox was conducting signals intelligence operations off the coast of North Vietnam. 3 torpedo boats attacked it. A brief exchange of fire followed. The torpedo boats were damaged and withdrew. The American vessels came through without a scratch. 2 days later, on the 4th of August, a storm moved into the Gulf. The Maddox radar began picking up unidentified contacts. The ships opened fire. The engagement lasted several hours. The official report that went up the chain of command said the same thing, attacked again by torpedo boats. The following day, American aircraft launched 64 strikes against North Vietnam. 3 days after that, Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, the document that gave President Lyndon Johnson the authority to wage war without a formal declaration. The Vietnam War had begun. Even at the time, Naval Officer John White, who had spoken directly with sailors who supposedly repelled the attack on the 4th of August, wrote a letter to Congress. His words were unambiguous. He stated that President Johnson, Secretary of Defense McNamara, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff had provided Congress with false information. The letter was ignored. Washington's official position held for decades. There was an attack, there was a response. Anyone who said otherwise was a conspiracy theorist. In 2005, the National Security Agency declassified nearly 200 documents related to the Tonkin incident. Among them was a study by agency historian Robert Hanyuk, written back in 2001 and immediately classified. His conclusion left no room for interpretation. The attack of the 4th of August never happened. The radar contacts were waves, and the ship's own wakes in storm conditions. 90% of the intelligence data that contradicted the attack was deliberately withheld from senior leadership. A war that killed nearly 60,000 American soldiers and more than 1 million Vietnamese people began with an attack that did not exist. President Johnson later compared the Tonkin Resolution to his grandmother's nightgown. In his words, it covered everything. In May of 1945, American forces entered Peenemünde, the Third Reich's secret rocket research facility. In one of the offices, they found a list, the Ozenberg list, a card index of German scientists whom the regime's leadership considered the country's most valuable specialists. Several months earlier, a Polish laboratory technician had discovered this same list in a toilet at the University of Bonn. Someone had clearly tried to destroy it. British intelligence passed the document to American counterparts, and they immediately went to work. The objective was spelled out in a classified Army memorandum with no ambiguity whatsoever. Acquire these people. The problem was that most of them were members of the German political apparatus, SS officers, and direct participants in war crimes. President Truman had specifically stipulated in his order, no active party members. American intelligence found a simple solution. They falsified the biographies. Records of party membership disappeared from personnel files. Documentation linking scientists to the use of concentration camp prisoners was removed. The new files were held together with paperclips. That is where the operation got its name. Operation Paperclip. The centerpiece acquisition was Werner von Braun, an SS Sturmbannführer, the chief designer of the V-2 rocket, a weapon built by the hands of 30,000 prisoners, more than half of whom did not survive. In September of 1945, von Braun and 127 of his colleagues arrived in Texas. When American officials processed his paperwork, the SS rank was simply gone. In total, more than 1,600 German specialists were brought to the United States through Operation Paperclip. In 1969, the Saturn V rocket, developed under von Braun's direction, lifted the Apollo 11 crew into orbit. The United States won the space race. The man who sent Americans to the moon built his first rockets on the bones of people who had no choice in the matter. The American government knew this from the very beginning. The files said so. They just made sure the files were hard to find. In the early 1980s, residents living near Tonopah Test Range in Nevada started noticing something odd. At night, angular silhouettes appeared in the sky. Nothing like any known aircraft. Triangular shapes, broken lines. Witnesses were dismissed as eccentrics. Officially, the base was testing outdated attack aircraft fitted with new avionics. No further explanation was offered. From 1983 onward, a combat aircraft that officially did not exist was flying operational missions out of the Nevada desert. The F-117 Nighthawk was the world's first production stealth aircraft, designed from the ground up to be invisible to radar. And the intellectual seed that made it possible did not come from an American laboratory. In 1962, Soviet physicist Pyotr Ufimtsev published a mathematical paper on electromagnetic wave scattering. He was working on a theoretical problem. He had no idea what he was handing to the other side. Soviet military authorities paid almost no attention to the work. Engineers at Lockheed read it, understood its implications immediately, and built an entire technology around it. The aircraft flew exclusively at night. Pilots lived on a classified base and were forbidden from discussing their work with anyone, including their own families. Over 7 years of covert operations, several aircraft were lost. The crashes were either suppressed or attributed to other causes. On the 10th of November 1988, the Pentagon released its first official statement. The public was shown a single retouched photograph. A live demonstration for a broader audience came in April of 1990. By that point, the Nighthawk had already been preparing for war for years. It flew its first combat missions in Panama in December of 1989, 3 weeks before the Pentagon acknowledged the aircraft existed. An entire branch of modern aerospace technology traces back to a Soviet academic paper that the Soviet military never bothered to read. In 1947, a farmer from New Mexico found wreckage of something unidentifiable in his field. The military arrived, collected everything, and left. A few hours later, the Army announced it had been a weather balloon. That was the beginning of Roswell, and the beginning of the most productive disinformation campaign in the history of the American Armed Forces. For decades, legends multiplied around a classified base in the Nevada desert. Flying saucers, alien bodies, reverse engineering of extraterrestrial technology. Eyewitnesses swore they had seen strange lights in the sky. Former military personnel described hangars full of non-human remains. Journalists spent years trying to establish what was happening at a location that officially did not exist on any map. All of them were called paranoid. In 2013, the CIA declassified documents confirming the base existed. But instead of aliens, there was something else entirely. From the late 1950s onward, the facility was used to test the most advanced reconnaissance aircraft in the world. First the U-2, then the A-12, the predecessor of the SR-71 Blackbird. These aircraft flew at altitudes above 20,000 meters, leaving contrails where, By the understanding of the time, no aircraft was physically capable of flying. Commercial airline pilots filed reports about unidentified objects. Military explanations were unconvincing. The declassified documents revealed something that reframes the entire story. The Pentagon had deliberately encouraged UFO rumors. A colonel distributed fabricated photographs of flying saucers to journalists. Military personnel were briefed on fictional units dedicated to studying alien craft. While everyone was scanning the sky for little green men, nobody was asking the right questions about spy planes. The conspiracy was real. It just did not have any aliens in it. The government did not deny the saucers because the truth was more mundane. They denied them because the truth was more valuable. Throughout the Cold War, rumors circulated through the ranks of the United States Army. Soldiers described being sent on special training exercises, injected with unknown substances, placed in chambers filled with gas. They were told afterward it was routine. Officers signed non-disclosure agreements. When veterans tried to find out what had been done to them, they were denied access to their own medical records. They were called paranoid. From 1948 through 1975, the United States Army conducted systematic tests of chemical agents and psychoactive substances on its own military personnel at Edgewood Arsenal in Maryland. Thousands of soldiers passed through the program. They were administered sarin, mustard agent, the incapacitating compound BZ, a powerful hallucinogen capable of inducing prolonged psychotic states, and numerous other chemical warfare agents. Some were told to take pills without being given any information about what was in them. Others had toxins applied directly to their skin. Participants temporarily lost their vision, experienced severe hallucinations, and entered paranoid dissociative states. Running parallel to Edgewood, under a program called Project 112, American warships were sprayed with sarin and mustard agent while underway, without the crew's knowledge. What happened to those sailors remained unknown for years. The Department of Defense classified the results. In the 1950s and 60s, the Army also dispersed chemical agents over residential neighborhoods in St. Louis, Fort Wayne, and Corpus Christi, studying how warfare agents spread in urban environments. Residents were not informed. The government acknowledged these tests in the mid-1990s, after the relevant documents were declassified. When congressional members began asking questions, it emerged that a portion of the Edgewood program documentation had been destroyed. From what survived, one thing was clear. The Army was aware of the long-term health consequences for participants and continued the experiments anyway. In 1984, American intelligence detected something unusual. 2 intercontinental ballistic missiles were launched from Soviet territory 40 minutes apart. Both were routine tests, no warheads, just flight trials. But analysts noticed one detail that did not fit. The first missile completed its flight profile normally. The second launched on its own, without any visible command from the ground. That detail was classified. It would take nearly a decade before American analysts understood what they had actually been watching. The Soviet Union began developing the perimeter system in August of 1974. The logic was straightforward. American strategic doctrine at the time included the concept of a decapitating strike, destroying Soviet leadership in the opening minutes of a conflict. If the command structure is dead, there is no one left to authorize a retaliatory launch. The Soviet military built a system that would authorize it without them. Perimeter functioned as follows. In a crisis, senior leadership would activate the system and place it on combat standby. A network of sensors, seismic, radiation, electromagnetic pulse detectors would begin continuous monitoring. If the sensors registered the signatures of a massive nuclear strike, and the system simultaneously lost contact with its command centers, it acted autonomously. Command missiles would launch and fly over Soviet territory, transmitting launch authorization codes to every component of the nuclear triad: silo-based missiles, submarines, and strategic bombers. In January of 1985, Perimeter entered active service. In 1993, journalists at the New York Times wrote about the Soviet doomsday machine. Soviet officials did not deny it. One of the system's lead engineers, General Valery Yarenich, later offered an explanation that shifted the framing entirely. The goal of Perimeter was not only to guarantee retaliation, it also guarded against the opposite failure. A panicked general launching missiles without confirming an attack was actually underway. The system was designed to slow everything down and create time to think. According to available reporting, Perimeter has been modernized and remains on active duty. A machine that can end civilization is still running. Somewhere underground, sensors are listening. In the 1980s, American spy satellites were methodically photographing Soviet rail infrastructure. CIA analysts studied the imagery, looking for something specific, something that theoretically could exist, but had never been documented. Intelligence suggested the Soviet Union was developing trains carrying intercontinental ballistic missiles, trains that would move continuously across the country and could not be destroyed in a preemptive strike because nobody would know where they were. In Washington, most people did not believe it. The concept of a rail-mobile ballistic missile launcher had been studied in the Soviet Union since the late 1960s. The central engineering problem was almost mockingly difficult. How do you fit a rocket 23 meters long and weighing more than 100 tons inside a standard refrigerated freight car in a way that makes the train look completely ordinary from the outside? The designers solved it. On the 20th of October, 1987, the 1st Missile Regiment equipped with the Molodets system entered combat duty at Kostroma. Externally, the 17-car train was indistinguishable from routine rail traffic: 3 locomotives, refrigerator cars, passenger cars. Internally, it contained a command post, 70 military personnel, and 3 launch vehicles. Each missile carried 10 independently targetable nuclear warheads. The train operated on the general rail network, passing through cities, stations, and rural junctions at speeds of up to 120 kilometers per hour. In a single day, the consist could cover up to 1,200 kilometers. Routes were never repeated. A combat patrol cycle lasted 21 days. By 1991, 12 such trains were on active duty. 3 divisions based in the Kostroma, Perm, and Krasnoyarsk regions. American satellites were never able to track them reliably. There were simply too many ordinary trains moving across the Soviet rail system for the unusual ones to stand out. Under the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, Russia destroyed all Molodets complexes by 2007. Of the 12 trains, 2 survived. They are in museums. For roughly 2 decades, nuclear warheads capable of destroying dozens of cities were quietly rolling past ordinary train stations, and almost nobody on the platform had any idea. In the 1960s, American intelligence learned of a Soviet program to develop military orbital stations. The information was fragmentary. The Soviet side had classified the project so thoroughly that the Almaz stations were publicly referred to as Salyuts, with no description of their actual purpose. When Western analysts began suggesting that Soviet orbital stations might carry weapons, they were called paranoid. Work on the Almaz orbital station began in the Soviet Union in 1964 under the direction of Vladimir Chelomey. The official mission was photographic reconnaissance. The unofficial mission was a combat platform in orbit. In the early 1970s, engineers developed a specialized aircraft cannon modified for operation in open space and installed it on the Almaz design. The weapon was a 23mm cannon capable of 950 rounds per minute. Each projectile weighed 200 grams and left the barrel at close to 700 meters per second. During ground testing, a burst from the cannon cut a metal barrel in half at a distance of more than 1 kilometer. On the 26th of June, 1974, a station officially designated Salyut 3 was placed into orbit. In reality, it was Almaz 2 with the cannon on board. The decision was made to conduct the weapons test without a crew present. On the 24th of January 1975, as the station's engines fired a deorbit burn to bring it down from orbit, the cannon fired approximately 20 rounds. The projectiles entered the dense atmosphere ahead of the station itself. It remains the only known instance of a weapon being fired in outer space, and it stayed classified for several decades. The Outer Space Treaty of 1967 banned nuclear weapons in orbit. It said nothing about conventional ones. Every arms control agreement has edges. The Soviet military found this one. On the 8th of March 1968, the Soviet submarine K-129 vanished without a trace in the Pacific Ocean. On board were 98 crew members, 3 ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads, and classified cryptographic equipment. The Soviet Navy launched a large-scale search operation. They found nothing. The USSR officially declared the vessel lost. The Americans found it first. A specialized nuclear-powered submarine, the Halibut, equipped with deep-water camera systems, produced thousands of photographs of K-129 lying on the floor of the Pacific at a depth of 5,600 meters, roughly halfway between Hawaii and the Kuril Islands. The Soviet Union had no idea where the wreck was. That was when the CIA proposed something that most participants in the initial meeting considered completely absurd: raise the submarine from the bottom. Only 3 people were informed of the project at the outset: President Nixon, CIA Director William Colby, and billionaire Howard Hughes, brought in as cover. A purpose-built vessel of 63,000 tons was constructed, officially described as a deep-sea floor survey ship. Concealed inside was a submersible barge carrying a massive mechanical claw. Preparation took 6 years and cost $350 million. In July of 1974, the ship positioned itself above the wreck site. In full view of Soviet naval vessels, which took the operation for routine ocean drilling, the mechanical claws descended to a depth of 5 kilometers and closed around the submarine's hull. The recovery took several weeks. When the recovered section was nearly at the surface, the hull broke apart. The larger portion, containing the missiles and the cryptographic compartment, fell back to the bottom. What the Americans recovered was the forward section, along with nuclear torpedoes and the bodies of 6 Soviet sailors, who were buried at sea with the Soviet national anthem playing. Exactly what intelligence was extracted from the recovered portion of the submarine remains classified to this day. 9 stories, 9 conspiracies. 9 times someone knew something, said nothing, and the rest of the world found out decades later, or is still waiting. If this kind of history is what you come here for, subscribe to the channel. There is a great deal more where this came from. Leave a comment telling us which of these 9 you found the most disturbing. And if you think someone else needs to hear these stories, hit the like button. It is the simplest way to make sure this kind of content keeps getting made.